Hallie, and tonight we are coming on the air with new and exclusive details about a failed Republican candidate, a losing Republican candidate in New Mexico, who police are calling the mastermind behind what appear to be politically motivated shootings. He's going to be making his first court appearance tomorrow. You're about to see it. Police taking Solomon Pena into custody in Albuquerque, accused of paying 4 men to shoot at the homes of 2 local county commissioners and 2 state lawmakers. Incredibly, nobody was hurt, but wait till you hear some of these details. Pena ran for the New Mexico State House back in November and lost. Officials say he was angry about that, saying things like that the election was rigged against him. New Mexico state officials are telling us those claims are not true. No fraud was found in the state elections, they say. Well, after the election, police say he showed up in person at the homes of elected officials to confront them over losing his race. And then just a few weeks later after that, in December, you had drive-by shooting attempts at the 4 homes of these lawmakers you see here. One former county commissioner telling NBC News exclusively she was unsettled when Pena showed up to her home angry. County Commissioner Adrian Barboa talked with me, talked with my colleague Katie Tur about going through something similar, a similar experience. Listen.
He also came to my front door after elections, pretty aggressive. I didn't feel threatened necessarily at the time, but he was speaking a little erratic and pretty aggressive.
Pena's campaign did not respond to our request to comment, but pull back a little bit here on these shootings, the latest example of increasing threats against politicians, this growing concern about political violence in this country, from members of Congress to local school board members to election workers. According to Capitol Police, there were more than 9,000 threats against members of Congress just last year, up 400% from 6 years ago. Ryan Nobles is joining us now. And Ryan, talk to us about how this has unfolded, because what is very clear is what a close call this was. The new arrest documents tell us that in one instance, a bullet got so close to the daughter of a local official who was sleeping, a 10-year-old in her bed, that she felt sheetrock dust on her face when this happened. I mean, this is extraordinarily scary stuff.
Yeah, it's really terrifying, Hallie. And when you read through the court documents, it's actually shocking that no one ended up being injured as a result of these attacks, that it ended up only being a situation where they were terrorized, which in itself is traumatic enough. But essentially what we're learning about Solomon Pena was that he was a disgruntled candidate, someone who was clobbered in an election to the state house in Arizona, and then for some reason thought that the election was rigged against him and decided to act out, hiring a group of individuals to go and terrorize these election officials and Democratic officials by essentially just shooting bullets into their homes on several different occasions. And, Pena was someone who was a supporter of former President Donald Trump, firmly believed, despite having no evidence to back it up, that his election was stolen. The way he responded to that grievance was this violent attack on the homes of these individuals, which ultimately led police to start their investigation and try and figure out exactly what happened.
So what happens from here? Because the accusation is that he ended up paying 4 people to sort of conspire in these attacks. I spoke with one county commissioner, Adrian Barboa, who said there is a sense of relief from her and some of her colleagues that at least these individuals have been arrested, that somebody's been charged here, but says the community is still on edge and that this is just a sad day, she says, for democracy.
Yeah, and I think, Hallie, it is important to point out that police have said that they have had someone who basically tipped them off, that was involved in this conspiracy, that figured out exactly, that was able to lead them to put the pieces together to ultimately discover that it was Pena that was behind all of this. And they even believe that he was involved personally with one of the shooting attempts, but that the gun that he had failed to discharge at that time. So they do believe they have their man here, that by essentially putting him under arrest, that's going to stop these attacks from happening going forward. But there's no doubt that it has rocked this community, and as you have rightly pointed out, an example of how political violence like this is on the uptick across America.
Talk about that. Pull back the lens a little bit. Pull back the aperture, Ryan, because this fits into that bigger picture of the idea that experts have said there has been an uptick in this kind of violence over the past 5 years or so, that they are increasingly seeing it. You can see incidents of political violence that we've seen even just since October of 2020. It is, in the eyes of many experts, a pivotal and scary moment right now in this country, given the dangerous divisions.
Yeah, and when you talk to members of Congress, Hallie, this is something that they feel on a visceral level. Yet many of them have been forced to, out of their own pockets, hire private security. You've had members of Congress talk about people driving up and down in front of the streets, in front of their homes, leave violent and disgusting messages on their personal voicemail, send emails to their family members. This is something that has happened on an everyday basis for many of these members of Congress. And it's not just members of Congress, as we're seeing, it's elected officials on all levels, and it is both Republicans and Democrats. So it is something that seriously needs to be dealt with, and it's something that no one has real clear answers as to what the solution is.
Ryan at Nobles, I'm sure we'll be talking more about this as that suspect is in court tomorrow, and I'll be doing a full report tonight on Nightly News with Lester Holt at 6:30 Eastern. We'll see you then. We've also got some other late-breaking news tonight. We're learning a Massachusetts man, Brian Walsh, is now being charged with the murder of his wife, Anna. The district attorney announcing this whole thing not too long ago. Watch.
The continued investigation has now allowed police to obtain an arrest warrant charging Brian Walsh with the murder of his wife. Mr. Walsh will be transported to the Quincy District Court for arraignment on the charge of murder.
This is a case that has captured national attention because Walsh had already been charged with misleading the investigation, was in custody for that. Police say his wife, Anna, was last seen on New Year's Day. It was Brian and Anna's boss from her D.C. area-based company who reported her missing 3 days later. Ron Allen is joining us now. And Ron, it's a murder charge coming about a week after prosecutors say they found a bloody knife in Walsh's basement. What else do we know about how this came together today?
Well, the big mystery is what has happened to Anna Walsh, and why are police and investigators now convinced that they can prove that she's dead, because that's the basis of this murder charge. There was a lot of evidence that was piling up against her husband, apparently. In court, the prosecutors said that he'd been seen on surveillance video buying cleaning supplies like tarps and buckets and mops at a Home Depot. And there is evidence, there's reporting that a search of a trash dumpster near his mother's home found a hacksaw blade and bloody towels and such. So there seemed to be a lot of evidence coming down on him, and now prosecutors have put together the rest of the case. So we'll see when he's arraigned in court tomorrow what other things, what other details they reveal about this. But again, the big question is still, we don't know what happened to this woman, and we don't know what it is that has convinced authorities that she is deceased.
We also know that Walsh is supposed to be arraigned for this murder charge as soon as tomorrow morning. Do we think we may get more details on this then, Ron?
Perhaps. Okay. We don't know. Again, you would think that there will be some release of documents, because certainly there's a compelling, the public wants to know what happened to her. There's been an outpouring of grief and sorrow for this family, a lot of wondering what happened to her. He has been in custody now for some time, not just on that misleading of the investigators charge, but because he was awaiting sentencing on a federal fraud and wire charge. So there's that as well. But again, the bottom line is, we hope that in the coming days, or at least very soon, we can learn more about what happened to Anna, and again, as the case builds against her husband.
Ron Allen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's talk about what's happening in Washington, with the White House today holding a call with reporters after more and more pressure for transparency when it comes to those classified documents found at President Biden's D.C. office and private home in Delaware. Not a ton of new info in the call, but the fact that there was a call at all is significant here, with one White House official saying there's a notable tension between respecting the ongoing investigation by the Justice Department, by the special counsel, and providing information publicly, right? The idea of, hey, providing public information versus can't say stuff because of this DOJ investigation. But our team at NBC is now learning the DOJ has not told the White House not to talk about the facts of what happened, according to a law enforcement official, which adds another twist to this whole thing. Still, the repeated dodges from the White House on some of these key questions, only, if you will, stoking the fire. And the politics piece on all of this is House Republicans hit the gas pedal today, asking for communications and documents. The White House is clapping back at that, saying, hey, the outrage from the GOP here is pure theater compared to how they responded to documents found at former President Trump's home. Here's the House Speaker today.
Prior to an election, they kept it secret. At no time did he get raided by the FBI. They put a special prosecutor only after other people raise the issue. But are the same amount of agents investigating this that are investigating President Trump? Is the same push behind it? It just does not seem fair.
I want to bring in now Kelly O'Donnell, who is live for us there outside the White House. So, Kelly, one of the things that I had heard from Democratic allies of President Biden's, one of them describing being, their words, pissed about the response that the White House had to the documents thing. It seems like part of what is behind this conversation with reporters today is to, if not push back on that, at least be able to show, hey, we're doing what we can, but in some ways our hands are tied because of this DOJ investigation.
That seems like a fair assessment of what's happening, because they did put a White House official on the record, although not on camera, but making the opportunity available for reporters to ask questions and to try to address this. It is an unfortunate situation for the Biden White House that there is a similar set of issues, only in the area that we're talking about classified information, and the Trump situation has classified information. That's about the end of the similarities. The facts are so different in the Trump matter. So you can have the House Speaker McCarthy talking about that and really mixing up the facts. They're so separate. That's a political problem for the Biden White House that they have to deal with, because there could be crossover in how people perceive this when the facts are really quite different. At the same time, you can have allies of the president, friends of the president, Democrats who are frustrated about how this has come forward, because this White House, the Biden White House, did not provide all of the information in as fast a way as you might expect when they did have knowledge of this going back to November before the election. And there have now been 3 different instances where information about classified materials, and we don't know exactly how many pages or how many documents, because they haven't been able to provide that to us either, are involved here. So there's been a sort of drip, drip, drip quality. And then at the same time, they make a point that they say is a note of caution that they want to take, that they don't want to put information out that could ultimately change or be kind of an impediment to the investigation. Now, as you noted, the Department of Justice isn't telling them not to talk. So this is a strategic decision by the Biden White House to try to say they want to be transparent, be limited in being transparent, and try to cooperate at the same time. They're trying to thread a few needles, and they won't make everybody happy in the process of doing that. And so they say there's tension between transparency and cooperation, and boy, are we seeing that play out. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell live for us there outside the White House on this story. Kelly, thank you. Across California, the skies are relatively clear, which is much needed good news for that state. It means the work can really start, keep going as much as it can on the cleanup push without having to worry about another big storm setting everybody back. And for a lot of businesses that got hit pretty badly, they just don't have time to waste on this. They say they need to get things back up and running ASAP.
It's just water damage everywhere, and you've got to cut all the floors completely out and relay them. And, you know, I really hope we can get some of these open by spring break. The spring break's a big deal here. President Biden will be in California Thursday, set to visit some communities along the Central Coast to see this damage for himself. So as for the aftermath of the most recent storm, right now the Rockies are feeling the impact now. Tomorrow, the storm's going to move across Colorado and up through the northern plains. That means the real big concern will be less the rain and more the snow. Really bad thunderstorms across the south after that could affect something like 5 million people. This thing is not over for a lot of people in this country. Dana Griffin is in Capitola, California, which has really borne the brunt of it over the past week plus. Dana, talk us through it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned the fact that these businesses are trying to get open by spring, because, you know, the tourism industry here is huge, including for Zelda's, which is right behind us. Their owner says that they don't have time to wait for any sort of FEMA assistance. So she's actually putting her own money into the restoration here. We've heard hammering and drilling. We've seen a lot of the wheelbarrows go back and forth. They are starting that restoration, and they are vowing to get back up and running. As far as people in other areas, they've experienced flooding, mudslides, down trees. So this has been devastating for people all across this region, not only the business owners. We actually spoke to a homeowner who talked about just how much water came inside his home over the last several weeks. Listen.
The first storm we had 3 feet. Second storm we had 5 feet. third storm 3 feet. So the second one about a week ago was the 5-footer, and that's what did most of the damage, brought most of the mud up.
And Hallie, the concern now is still because we've got that saturated soil, mudslides down trees. So officials are warning people to stay vigilant and do not get comfortable. Even as they are cleaning up some of the debris here, there's still a potential hazard in the state, Hallie.
Talk about what's happening further up north in California, especially in the mountains of California, because it's been rain for a lot of people where you are. It's been snow for a lot of them. Snow by the foot piling up. The snowpack at epic levels, according to one state official. That's actually not a bad thing necessarily as we look at some of these images here for the state's drought, but it may be a concern when it comes to potential flooding in the spring, right?
That's right. If we were to have some sort of unusually warm start to the spring, it could melt that snowpack too quickly, and you could have some localized flooding. So that's one less thing that people want to stress about here in California. And you're right, the snowpack is so important because it helps to keep our moisture, keep our reservoirs, full, and that's something that residents do not want to see. So hopefully things stay pretty cool and gradually warm up so that we can keep that moisture here because, we've had a very severe drought. Hallie?
That's right. Dana Griffin, live for us there in Capitola. Dana, thank you. Let's talk about Elon Musk defending his tweets in a civil court today. Not one of the new tweets since he's actually owned Twitter, but an old one that some Tesla investors say caused them to lose a ton of money. This is it from August 2018, saying that Musk was thinking about taking Tesla, the electric car company, private at $420 a share, and that the money's all lined up. Guess what? Turns out that never happened. At the time, the SEC says Musk knew that. So they made him and the company split a $40 million fine, made him step aside as chairman for 3 years. They said they had to do that at the time to stop any further harm to shareholders. Now, a judge has already ruled that the tweets were not true. So the question now is, were shareholders actually hurt by it? The billionaire, Musk, has insisted he really thought he did have the money. That's what he thought. Dave Ingram joins us now. Interesting here because, if you had Tesla stock at the time, your stock's gone up way up since then, like 6 times the value, but the suit is still continuing. So walk us through these arguments and how they lay out.
Yeah, so we're going to see several questions addressed during this trial over the next few weeks. One of the big ones is, did investors rely on this information, these tweets from Musk, when they were buying and selling Tesla shares during this crucial sort of 10-day period? So this period kicked off with the initial tweets. About 10 days later, it became clear that the funding really wasn't secured. But in that period of time, you had people investing on the premise that Tesla shares were likely headed toward that 420 number. And the question is, were they really relying on Musk? And Musk, among the defenses that he has used since then was he said that he was in talks with the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. That he was in consistent, deep talks with them to back taking Tesla private. We expect that will come up in this courthouse in San Francisco.
There's something else at stake for Musk here, his reputation. Let me put up a graphic that our team made that runs through, the saga of Elon Musk over the last few years, from the lawsuit over this tweet, a lawsuit on his compensation package, price cuts to cars, questions over the software for Tesla on self-driving, how he's handled Twitter just recently. What are you hearing in Silicon Valley, right? What is the impact of some of this stuff reputationally for Musk? Or do people kind of just look at this and go, that's Elon Musk being Elon Musk?
I think that was the attitude for many years, that people, especially given that he had started a rocket company, that he had made electric vehicles a real market when other automakers had struggled to do that. And, he had these grand ambitions of going to Mars, whatever you think of that idea. And I think, ever since, I think his reputation has been called into question again and again. He had talked up the idea of self-driving cars arriving very soon. That has not happened. The Mars idea looks less and less imminent. And his handling of Twitter, I think, has alarmed a large number of people who worry about the spread of hate speech and other things on that platform. And I think this trial will probably go a long way toward the attitude of regulators toward Elon Musk. He has been battling with the SEC. They settled, but the outcome of this may either bolster the SEC's reputation or Elon Musk's.
Dave Ingram, we'll see how this goes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So listen, it is only January, but crypto investors are hoping that their winter is over because of some potential signs of hope that this long price dip may finally be slowing down. Look at Bitcoin and Ethereum. We're highlighting these two because they're the biggest on the market. Each of them starting off the year pretty strong. Look at this, 25 to 30%. Now, keep in mind, those gains are lower than when they hit their peak in November 2021. CNBC's Kate Rooney is here. And, Kate, we wanted to have you on for a gut check, right? Like, because of what we've seen over the last few years, crypto shoots up and then falls. What are I know you don't have a crystal ball, but, like, what is real about this bump right now in January and what's not?
Hallie, yeah, it's all relative, right? It depends on when you bought in terms of how you're feeling, because the all-time high is still around $68,000. So there's still some people that have lost money. But what is real is a lot of people have recouped some of those losses. So they're back in the green or in the black. The average price for Bitcoin investors where they got in is measured around $19,700. So it's trading above that. That's called the cost basis. So when Bitcoin or really any asset trades above that level, it's seen as an optimistic sign. So some good news for the average investor in terms of the price that they got in. It often fuels more buying when people are feeling optimistic. And then the other thing about this rally that we've seen is that really, despite people buying Bitcoin, saying that it's digital gold, that it's some sort of hedge against inflation and what's going on, it really does not act that way. It doesn't trade that way. It acts for a proxy, acts as a proxy for risk, pretty much. The same thing you've seen with really tech stocks. So when investors are comfortable taking on more risk in the market, Bitcoin tends to do really well. That's what we're seeing this week. You've seen the same thing play out with tech stocks, which are also on the rise. Bitcoin is really seen as the riskiest asset out there, and it's doing pretty well this week.
There are a lot of questions at this moment, as you know, especially from where I sit here in Washington, about regulating crypto, right? After we saw the FTX blow up, what happened with Sam Bankman-Fried, et cetera. Where does that go? Because there's this ruling coming up in a New York federal court that could help give us some insight into that.
That's been one of the big questions, and who is sort of the cop on the beat, as some people might describe it. The lawsuit you mentioned, this is a dispute that goes back to 2020. It's around a company called Ripple and a specific cryptocurrency tied to that company. So the judge in this case, depending on their ruling, could make a decision here about whether that specific cryptocurrency should be viewed as a security. That's the same thing as a stock, really, what a stock is categorized as. Some people in the industry have said, no, it should be exempt and therefore overseen by a different agency. The SEC is the one who oversees securities. So it would be a big deal for those in the industry. It could affect hundreds of other companies, other cryptocurrencies out there. And it really has been this turf battle we've seen play out. And there's been a lot of companies that have operated overseas and avoided being regulated at all by either of these agencies. And that's really what we saw play out with FTX.
Kate Rooney, it's always great to have you reporting and your gut checks here on the show. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good.
So listen, Moderna, just in the last hour, not even, has announced they have a vaccine that works against RSV. You know RSV. It's that respiratory virus that spiked for kids this season, with some hospitals overwhelmed from it. The studies found that this vaccine was about 83% effective for adults over the age of 60. That's the group, along with kids, who get RSV the most. Now, this is not approved yet. Moderna does plan to ask for that. This vaccine may be ready later this year, but they're still doing trials on kids and pregnant women who are also at high risk of getting sicker from RSV. Dr. John Torres is joining us now. And Dr. Torres, like, listen, I think any new parent knows RSV can be scary for babies, right? Like, it is the leading cause of hospitalization for infants in the U.S. Looking at the data that Moderna has released so far, does it seem likely to you, based on your expertise, that a vaccine that works in adults could also work in kids?
And the answer is yes, it should. But like we always say in science, time will tell, and we'll get an idea. There's no reason not to think this won't work in kids. And they're doing this the way they normally do it when we're not in the middle of a pandemic or an emergency situation like the pandemic was. And so they're doing these trials in certain age groups. It happens to be that they're starting these off in the older age group because those are the ones, like you mentioned, children and adults above the age of 60 are the ones that are hit the hardest. But when it comes to RSV deaths, we're talking looking at children around 300 a year, looking at adults 60 and older around 10,000 a year. And so it really hits them very hard. And so they're saying, let's go ahead and make sure, number one, it's safe in this age group, it's effective in this age group, and then we'll start dropping it down. Instead of doing like they normally do, where they drop it down to lower age groups, younger adults, and then teenagers, and then dropping it down to kids, eventually doing that over time, like we saw with the COVID vaccine. In this case, they're jumping from older adults down to children, young children, because those are the other ones that are heavily affected by this. But looking at trials, this is a phase 3 trial in adults. It looks like it's going to be successful. Time will tell, because we're talking this next coming winter when it should be available. We think it should work in children as well, but they're going with the trials to make sure it is safe and effective, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we have both.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. People know RSV. We've talked about it a lot this winter because it was part of the triple-demic, RSV, flu, COVID. If this vaccine does get approved and it starts to go into use, it means that there would be vaccines for all three, COVID, flu, RSV, these potentially dangerous respiratory viruses. However, Dr. John, you know as well as I do, vaccines only work if people actually go and get them. We saw lower vaccination rates this fall. What's going to be different about RSV if there's a potential vaccine?
And Hallie, you're right. You could have the best vaccine in the world. If people don't get it, it's not going to be effective. And then we do have that herd immunity we always talk about that 95% coverage to try and keep it out of certain communities. And we think with RSV that might work equally as well. But again, them getting it is the issue. And we found out early on there were a lot of missteps in that messaging and managing that messaging, and people not thinking, okay, they're not getting the full answer, so they're a little wary about getting the vaccine. So that's something they're going to have to tackle as well, to make sure they get a good message out there, a consistent message, an honest message that people believe.
Dr. John Torres. Dr. John, always good to see you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Coming up, real fear, real concern down in Florida with a mass shooting after an MLK Day parade, leaving one person dead. We'll take you live to the ground. Plus, disturbing video, what police are calling an attempted kidnapping in Washington state. Look at this, how a suspect tried dragging a barista out a drive-through window. We'll talk about it later in The Local. Greta Thunberg, well-known climate activist, arrested in Germany today. We're going to explain why in our 5 things. But first, police say today one person is dead after a shooting at a party after a Martin Luther King Jr. Day parade in Florida. Yeah, that's what it looked like right after the shooting started. You saw people there yelling, scrambling, trying to get some cover. 7 people altogether were hurt. 4 from running away, 4 more, I should say. And some somber and emotional words from the St. Lucie County Sheriff.
What was a shooting investigation has turned into a murder investigation.
Guad Venegas is at the scene for us in Fort Pierce, Florida. And Guad, we're getting that update, learning that the victim was a 30-year-old mom who took her 6-year-old daughter to the parade. Police say they have evidence this could have been gang-related. What else do we know?
Hallie, we know there were a lot of families here, according to the witnesses who were here. I've been speaking to families who live around the park, and I asked if there were a lot of kids. They said, yes, there was mothers, there was fathers, there was whole families celebrating after that Martin Luther King parade that took place about 12 blocks away from here. The people came here after the parade for an after party. We're located in that same parking lot where we just saw the images that were recorded with a cell phone video. Now, the St. Lucie's Sheriff's Office, the St. Lucie's County Sheriff's Office, is leading this investigation because the park is under the county's jurisdiction. So, as you mentioned, we know that 8 people were wounded from the gunshots. 1 has died. This is the woman that was here with her 6-year-old daughter. And additionally, 4 others were injured when they were running away from the gunshots. Now, we also know from the Sheriff's Office that they recovered more than 50 shell casings from 3 different weapons. They informed that they believed this was the result from a confrontation between 2 rival gangs, and they sent a message to the community authority today, saying that if anyone is protecting or hiding the individuals responsible, they will also be prosecuted as the investigation continues. Hallie.
Pull back a bit, because it has already been a deadly year from gun violence in this country, with the Gun Violence Archive saying nearly 2,000 people are dead from guns, more than half by suicide. There have been 30 mass shootings this year alone in 2023, right? And it is only the middle of January. By the way, they define that as anything where 4 or more people are shot. I know, and I'm sure that you are hearing about a sense of fear and concern on the ground there.
Hallie, when we arrived, we found a family just over in this direction, and I spoke with them for about 30 minutes to get an understanding of what it's like here. And one of the individuals that lives across the park told me usually he hears gunshots 4 to 5 times per week. That's what he told me. He said sometimes twice a day. So it isn't something new for him living in this area to hear of gun violence like what happened here. And then also about a month ago, a mile away from here, a 27-year-old man was shot, and local police were asking for the public's help to find more clues into that investigation. That individual eventually died in the same hospital where those wounded here are being treated. And there's other kids that were playing in this area earlier. I walked up and spoke to the mother, and when I asked her if she had heard gunshots earlier this week or what kind of violence takes place here, all the kids walked up and said, "Oh, we hear them all the time." So that's, of course, anecdotally coming from the neighbors, but that's what they say it is like in this area. Now, another woman who said she was here when this happened, she said she arrived, she saw hundreds of people, and she stayed away. She went a little further down to celebrate because she felt like a large gathering in this area could result in violence, just like it did. So this is what I'm getting from the neighbors that live in this park or around the area, Hallie.
Guad Venegas live for us there in Fort Pierce, Florida. We're glad you're there for us on the ground. Thank you, Guad. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, China says its population is shrinking for the first time in 60 years. Officials there say more people died than were born last year, so the population shrank by like 850,000. China is the world's 2nd biggest economy. They count on a growing workforce, a growing consumer base for them. Number 2, German police carried Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg away from a coal mine protest today. She was there demonstrating against a mine's expansion that would destroy a village. Police say they detained Thunberg because she was sitting too close to the edge of the mine. They eventually released her. Number 3, former reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley started their federal prison sentences for bank fraud and tax evasion today, according to a spokesperson. Todd Chrisley reported to a prison in Florida. He's been sentenced to 12 years. Julie Chrisley reported to one in Kentucky, set to serve 7. An attorney for the couple declining to comment. Number 4, the Golden State Warriors at the White House today to celebrate their 2022 NBA championship with the president and VP there. There's Steph Curry. You saw Coach Steve Kerr also popping by the briefing room with the White House press secretary. Steph was thanking the administration for getting Brittany Griner home, something that he'd been a real vocal advocate for. Number 5, archaeologists in Norway say they've found the world's oldest rune stone, up to 2,000 years old, with the museum in Oslo saying it might be the earliest example of words recorded in writing in Scandinavia. The team found the stone when they were excavating a grave. If you're like, what is that? What does that mean? Researchers think it could be somebody's name. There you go. When we come back, the head of the World Food Program telling our own Keir Simmons that hundreds of millions of people around the world are marching towards starvation. Why he thinks this year will be bad, but next year could be even worse. Next. Somebody might be in big trouble because of the big thing they did not declare in their checked luggage at an airport in Texas. More on that in the local. But first, the head of the World Food Program is telling NBC News today that the food shortages around the world are so bad and could get worse, as we are already in the thick of one of the worst crises in years. The numbers are staggering. Listen to this.
Now, the number of people on planet Earth that are marching towards starvation is 350 million people, and it's only getting worse because of climate shocks, fuel costs, fertilizer problems, supply chain disruption. So 2023 is going to be bad, but 2024 could be catastrophic.
Keir Simmons is joining us now. And Keir, the food crisis is a story you have covered so closely for NBC News, and that outlook just sounds so desperate, right? Talk about more of what you heard and where this goes.
Well, that's right, Hallie. I mean, you remember I was in northern Kenya last year, and the destitution that I saw, farmers who'd lost their livestock and were struggling just to feed themselves because of climate change, something that folks in East Africa didn't do anything to cause. I saw all that, so we wanted to find David Beasley and get his take on what happens next, and it isn't good. It is bleak by his measure. And what he says is, here's the issue, is people suffering like that in Africa, in South America, they are going to leave their homes and migrate, and that's going to cause more problems for the developed world. Take a listen.
That is obviously not what you, I know, wanted to hear from Keir, but paraphrase it for us. What did he tell you?
Yeah, look, I mean, what he said was that their surveys of, because they work with people, feeding them, of course, their surveys are finding that more and more people are saying they want to move. And he says, listen, it's much cheaper to deal with the crisis now than to deal with it once kind of refugees and migrants arrive on people's doorstep. You know, Hallie, David Beasley's from South Carolina. He's been doing this role for many years. He leaves in April. He leaves with a lot of worries about how not only we're going to deal with this crisis, but how we're going to find the money to help people.
You know, I look at the World Food Program it relies so much on countries, right? Outside organizations, nations giving money. $14 billion it got last year alone, $7 billion of that from the U.S. I look at the economic climate in the U.S. I look at what's happening in Washington as it relates to stuff around the debt crisis, the uncertainty there, the uncertainty around the global economy generally. I imagine that is probably a part of his concern and the program's concern, too.
Yeah, it really is. You know, and listen, let's be straight about this. The American people, American government, incredibly generous, dealing with this kind of crisis. Admittedly, and it is worth pointing out again, that climate change has been caused by the developed world, right? So, you know, it's about fixing some problems that kind of you can say we caused, all right? But still, there is enormous generosity. But that debt crisis, that debt ceiling controversy, tension, and that could lead to a situation where there's less money. Another aspect of this, the strengthening dollar, because interest rates there are going up, that's causing stress on developing world's debt, because their debt is often in dollars. So again, another challenge. It does look really, really difficult looking ahead, and that's what David Beasley is worried about, and he is worried about whether there will be the money from donor countries like the US, like Germany, that they've seen in previous years.
Keir Simmons, I'm glad to have you on this really important story. Really appreciate you joining us live there from Switzerland. Thanks, Keir. We want to get to some developing news out here of Washington, with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy confirming that Congressman George Santos has been seated on a couple of committees. According to the reporting from our team here at NBC News, he's getting seats on the Small Business Committee and on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Not exactly like the top prestigious committees, but like, there you go. And the reason why this is so newsworthy, because like if you're saying to me, Hallie, are you serious? A member of Congress's committees, do I care? Remember, this is the guy who acknowledged lying about his resume. There were real concerns about, should he get access to like intelligence secrets, national security secrets? Would that be okay? Ryan Nobles is joining us now. It sounds like the answer is no. He did not get access to that stuff. He's on these other committees. Listen, no disrespect to any congressional committee. God bless science, space, and technology, you know what I mean? But there was obviously a lot of sort of machinations at play here.
Well, you know, Hallie, these are not the A committees, which I think is what you're alluding to. You know, there is a special group of committees which take the bulk of the most important policy challenges that face the Congress, and most of that is funneled through those A committees. Both of these committees, the Small Business Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committees, do not fall under that banner, but they still do very important work. I mean, a Small Business Committee in particular is something that you can go back to your constituents and show that you're actively involved in your community and you're helping people find jobs and build businesses. So these are still significant contributions that he will be able to be a part of in Congress. And there was some thought that he would not be assigned to any committees, that that would be kind of the line in the sand that the Republican leaders would be able to draw as all these investigations into George Santos play out. Kevin McCarthy's chosen to take a different route. When I just caught up with him a few minutes ago and asked him about the Santos committee assignments, and he basically told me that this is is standard protocol. He is a sitting Republican member of the House of Representatives, and that affords him the ability to sit on committees. And if you're not on one of the 8 committees, you get 2 committees, and these are the 2 committees that the steering committee has assigned him to. You say about classified briefings, that's not an impossibility with the Space, Science, and Technology committees.
That's also true.
They do deal with information that can often be sensitive. So there is the possibility. I mean, every member of Congress on any level, regardless of what committee they sit on, has the opportunity to be a part of classified briefings. So that's where George Santos is right now. And the simple fact of the matter is, Hallie, if we've talked back and forth about his future, until one of these investigatory bodies adjudicates this situation in some way, shape, or form, he is going to be an active member of Congress who's going to vote on important pieces of legislation. And that process needs to play itself out before anything's going to change.
It's a good point. Ryan Noble's live for us on the Hill. Thank you, sir. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Western Bureau, police in Washington State have arrested somebody, look at this, who they say tried to kidnap a barista through a drive-through Monday. Look at that. Do you see that? Grabbing her, trying to pull her out, doing something else there. That is bizarre and scary. Police say that was some kind of a zip tie thing that you just saw. She obviously wrenched back, broke free. The guy sped off. He left his money on the ground. Really scary. From our Southern Bureau, TSA officers at the San Antonio International Airport found this big old gun, this big old weapon in a checked bag. Looks kind of like an anti-tank weapon, although police didn't specify. Whoever brought it could face fines for not declaring it. They could even face legal trouble. No charges have been announced yet, but San Antonio police are going to figure out what happens from here. From our Midwest Bureau, the Chicago Bears introducing their new president and CEO today. At a press conference earlier, Kevin Warren saying building a new stadium is his sole focus. He is the first black president and CEO in the club's more than 100-year history. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, it is a very special backstory segment for us because the person pulling back the curtain is Kerry Sanders, sharing about his life, his career, his extraordinary time here at NBC News as he is retiring after 32 years, all 50 states, 65 countries, every continent, and the North Pole. And listen, if you have ever seen a Kerry story, you know he loves his job. And he loves to push the envelope. Watch.
Whoa, that wind is blowing. Fighting has been fierce for 2 days. After the running with the Bulls, there's a tomato fight. Good morning. And this is where that garbage winds up, much of it plastic.
Kerry has done live shots hanging out of choppers. You saw the live shots from underwater. He's been to hundreds of disaster zones. He's covered some of the best and worst moments in American history. His retirement, obviously a big loss for us, but the way he did his job and told his stories will obviously keep up making all of us better reporters. Kerry is joining us now. Why you gotta go? Why are you doing this to us, man?
You know, Hallie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. There is a balancing act here. And so for all of these stories, all those countries, every state, for all of these years, I've been on the road about 200 days a year. And I know you understand what it is to be on the road a lot. And it just felt like this is the right time for me to maybe spend some time with my wife and not always be gone. And we kind of got an idea, this is probably going to work out because for that first year of the pandemic, I was home and we realized, hey, this still works. This is great. So let's see what we can do together.
God, I love that so much. You know, we've been just looking back, and the Today Show did an amazing tribute this morning. We obviously wanted to have you on to talk about this. And we're showing it to viewers here. You've done everything. Like, you always had an adventure, it felt like. Is there some specific adventure that you're like, this changed my life, or I will never forget this, or this changed how I look at my job?
Well, so many, but I do recognize as a reporter that given opportunities to do things and then share them with viewers because there are things that folks may never get a chance to do. And one of the most amazing moments, I must say, is getting an opportunity to do what is often nicknamed the vomit comet, but to get into the plane that gives you the sensation of being in space, of zero G, and to float in that feeling. But we're looking at me jumping out of a plane right there a moment ago with the, with the Golden Knight States, flying in choppers over Honduras. I mean, having the opportunity to go to these places, landing on an aircraft carrier, being on an aircraft carrier in war. I mean, all of these amazing opportunities to be there, witness that, have people share with me what they're going through, and then get a chance to share that with the audience. All of that is just, you know, can you put your finger on one? It's hard to say, but I got to say that feeling of being weightless, amazing. There you go.
I love
Look
that.
at that. Look
there
at that.
it is.
Look at that.
The vomit comet.
Yes.
I didn't even know that's what they called it. Like, I love that. You know, one of the things is, Carrie, like, one of the many things, friend, that is so extraordinary about your time here at NBC News is that you've truly done it all. And by that, I mean, you are not pigeonholed as like one type of reporter, because you've done really serious stuff. I mean, even just our viewers will know on this show, your hurricane coverage, for example, they know you from that. Was there ever a moment, and I've had, you know, a couple of these as a reporter, where you gut checked and you were like, oh my God, is this really, like, can I do this emotionally? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we tell these stories?
Yeah, you know, if you want to talk about emotional moments, I can certainly go to several, but one when I was in Haiti, where a woman wanted to speak out against what was then sort of a military ruling group called FRAP, and she was adamant that she wanted the world to know what was going on and risked her life. And when I say she risked her life, sadly, after making a very difficult, calculated decision to go ahead and speak to me on camera and broadcast her thoughts, she sadly was then ambushed and killed. And so I recognize that this is a very, very powerful medium. Yeah. I can also tell you that I was in Afghanistan and spoke to a woman who was just trying to share with women very, very simple health information. And at the end of the day, she and her family were targeted. They escaped the country, made their way to Canada. Eventually, I got a chance to reunite with her daughter. We're now back and forth friends occasionally on Facebook. She is an amazing story. And then at the end of the day, there was a woman who was in Iraq who was a young woman, Rafraf, who was our translator, and then her life was threatened. And collectively, we were able to get her out of Iraq to the United States, where she lives now. So I've had an opportunity to work with people who have really risked their lives to tell me to then share their stories with the audience.
It's an incredible honor and a privilege, and you are the best of what we do here at NBC News. You're going to be so missed. What's the first thing you're doing, Care, when you're officially not going to be waking up to those Today Show calls? You know what I mean? Like, what's the first thing you're going to do when you're finally taking the next step?
Can I say I'll tune you in and listen to you?
That's so cheesy. You can say it. I know that's not true, but okay.
I'll probably go to a mountain, do a little skiing, because I already got that plan with some friends. And then I'm going to do the most important thing. I'm going to be home with my wife, and she and I, Deborah and I, are going to spend time together, kind of just moving at a different pace than the go, go, go nature of what you know news is.
Carrie Sanders, we love you. We will miss you. We are thrilled for you, and we're going to stay in touch.
Thank you.
That does it for this hour. We'll see you more tomorrow, same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.